All right, welcome back, everybody. Road to Retirement podcast. Tony Marlette Jr. at Brookside, Zach Padden at Anselmo Law, and Tony Shore over at Gradient. Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
Good morning.
Halfway through November, believe it or not.
Insane.
Unbelievable how fast
Time
this
flies.
year has gone.
Yep. The older you get, Zach wouldn't know, but the older you get.
I mean, it's hard to believe I've almost been here for a year. So it just seems like I just started last week and
right.
we're coming up on the year point.
I mean, you've been with Brookside Tax and Financial for 1 year compared to Chris, who started the company. Let's see, he's been there 103 years. He's been at Brookside.
And he's going to want to cut that out.
He's got you beat by roughly 100 years. I'm kidding. It seems like Chris has always been there, right? He's a fixture.
Yeah. I don't. There's really no Brookside without Chris. So
yeah, exactly. And remember the episode where we decided everybody working there was going to be named like he's Anselmo 1, you're Anselmo 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, and then there's the not Chris Anselmos.
Oh yeah, that's right. No, that's right. That's what we figured. It's there's only two people. The staff is Chris Anselmo and not Chris Anselmo.
Right. I meant to change our nameplates for the podcast to all just say not Chris Anselmo.
If he was on here with us, that would be great. Chris Anselmo, and then we are not.
Good
Chris
idea.
Anselmo.
We should keep that in our memory bank.
Yeah.
I've had people say to me though in meetings, "Well, you're not Chris."
Yeah.
Thank you. I am not. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I still know what I'm doing. See, that's the thing. You guys, you have experience, and Tony, I know you've been helping clients a long time. And Zach, you have the education, and you've been there a year helping clients. I think it's fantastic. But there's a lot going on. I don't know if you guys knew this, but a week ago, almost a week and a half ago, there was an election. Did you guys hear about that?
No. What happened?
I'm sure it's been talked about there in the office, and I'm sure our listeners and viewers are wondering, hey, is that going to affect my tax situation or my finances? Do I need to know anything?
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about some of that. I think we can, go over a little bit of an end of year financial / legal checklist. I think to some degree, everybody may be electioned out, but I do think there's some pretty good talking points as far as, what the Trump campaign had promised and what they ran on and what we saw in his first term and what we can look for in the future. And then, it's all speculation right now, honestly, but we can go based off of what's been said and really what's been done through during his first administration.
Yeah.
I don't know if any of it extends to anything legal, Zach, like estate planning wise. I know part of the Secure Act was the estate tax exemption, but I'm not sure on anything else. Do you know?
Yeah, other than the estate tax exemption, it doesn't really affect us too much until the point when they lower the threshold from the 25+ million it is. People aren't going to be affected. And if you are, that's great.
Good.
I mean, you have over 25 million in assets.
That's right.
But the average person isn't even affected by it. So people get worried about it for almost no reason at this point.
Yeah.
Good
well,
point.
The market has been up. It's up almost 10% just since the election last week. So the one thing I think a lot of traders have priced in is that some of these things that the Trump team has talked about, they're counting on that happening already. And the danger there, let's just give an example. So let's say if they decide to extend the Trump tax cuts from 17, say if they go with this deregulation approach, so they make it more business friendly. If that stuff's already priced in and it doesn't happen, then we're looking at a potential market drop. So it's an interesting way to look at it. If you look at, like I said, since last, Tuesday, a week and a half ago, market's up. The market is run on fear and greed, really. But perception is reality in the market. So if people think, and people who are big traders think that these things are going to happen, they're already baking it in, kind of like what we saw with the Fed and interest rate cuts.
Mm-hmm.
So if these things are not happening, we could be in for a little bit of a market drop, and we're probably overdue anyway for a market drop. I know earnings have been pretty strong. Earnings have been holding up the market, which I think is a good thing. That means the markets are being efficient and they're following, data. They're following rational numbers that you can actually look at and say, okay, this is why the market's up, not just perception, not just headlines, not just something that might happen, actual cold, hard data. So, barring those things not happening, yes, I think the market will be in for a little bit of an upswing here. But at any point, you guys know as well, it doesn't take much to bring that down.
No, somebody sneezes in China. The markets can fluctuate easily, but long term they don't. It's usually just a short term thing. But I know that you're right. Maybe some of Trump's policies are why the market is the way it is, or the outlook for possible policies now that when Trump takes president. But I think two things I think really affected it. Tell me what you think, Tony and Zach. I think that the decisiveness of the election, because everybody thought it would drag out and that it would be really close. I mean, on both sides, Republicans and Democrats thought this is going to be close. It's going to drag out. There might be legal battles, recounts, and the market doesn't like indecision, but it was a decisive victory. It was clean. We knew before the next morning, in the middle of the night, we knew who won, like olden days, it seems like. And so I think the market likes that, knowing what's going to happen, and coupled with the very next day, the Fed lowered interest rates again, right?
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. So there was some thought that they may not lower rates because based on, again, perception. These things are not in place yet. The threat of tariffs, tax cuts, that spurs all kinds of activity. So a rate cut may not be necessary. But yeah, you're right. The aside from all the other, I don't want to call it like culture war stuff, but
Right.
aside from all the other talking points and all the other hot button issues, yeah, the decisive victory did say a lot about. You're right. Markets like predictability. Markets like things that
they don't like
quantify.
uncertainty, do they?
For sure. Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that coupled with people view possibly the Republicans having a more corporate tax, better, maybe lowering corporate tax or keeping it low, not raising it. So I think that all of that combined, and we saw just record highs once again. Of course, the market hit record highs earlier in the year too. I mean, the market just keeps hitting record highs, luckily, and so it's been really strong and bullish lately. But that's fantastic. So the elections are over. Now what? We're headed toward the end of the year, right, guys?
Yeah, it's
what
amazing.
Do we need to do?
It's unbelievable. It's like October 31st on Halloween night at 8:01. Everybody's like, end of the year, Christmas.
I know. Yeah, that's when it happens. Oh, Halloween's over. Year-end planning. Let's start it now.
Yeah. So Zach, what do you think? End of the year. It isn't just like end of the year stuff that it has to happen at the end of the year, but it's a good time to take some inventory. Looking at your financial and your legal plan. What do you think people should be looking at if they're looking to get everything kind of sewn up for the end of the year?
Yeah, I mean, on the legal side, people should be reviewing their plan. I mean, every so often you need to take that packet of papers out and take a look at it. And most people are with their families over the holidays. You're seeing how people are looking. How's their health? Are they going a little crazy? Do I really trust them to make decisions for me anymore? Are we worried about how they are with their money? So you still want to give your kids a big lump sum all at once. All these are things that you need to look at while you're together with your family Or if you're looking at your parents, how are they doing? Have they done any of this stuff? And no time's better than the current to do anything. So you should look at that plan and try to figure something out.
Yeah, that's a good point. When's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. When's the second best time? Right now. And as far as estate planning, Zach, you're talking about making those moves, looking at your beneficiaries, right? That's something you should do every year toward the end of the year. Say, hey, and I like how you say, kind of assess those relatives at the Thanksgiving and Christmas. It's like, who's gone crazy here?
Yeah.
Is Uncle Fester claiming that he's St. Jerome again? Maybe I should take him off the beneficiary list. Let's check out my parents. I know I have an aunt and uncle that they want all my money, but I just and that's Uncle Sam and Aunt Irma. I think you guys might know.
Very
Uncle
good. I like
Sam
that one.
Yeah.
Aunt
Those
Irma.
two really scare me and make me want to, really. I kind of clutch my pocketbook tight when Uncle Sam and Aunt Irma are around.
That was good. I don't know if I've heard the aunt and uncle one with Sam and Irma. That's
I threw that together on my own.
Nice.
Every time somebody brings up Irma, I'm like, it sounds like an Aunt Irma.
So I think we need to give Tony a gold star.
We need to what?
We need to give you a gold star today. We need one of those up in the corner.
Star for the program. Yay.
Tony, I don't care what Chris says about you. You're pretty creative.
I'm sure he does. Yeah. Well, Chris is so full of knowledge and serious that sometimes my humor, my humor isn't necessarily where he's always at on the show. He's here to help people. I'm just here to throw in a little humor once in a while.
Yeah, comic relief.
Yeah. Well, hey, so Zach, obviously talking about year end, there's a lot of things on your side as far as like estate planning that people need to do, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you have nothing done, you need to think about just doing your simple, we call it the peace of mind package, which includes your wills, your financial and healthcare power of attorneys, the HIPAA release for the hospitals, and I can bore you with more, but you got to think about who you're trusting with these decisions. And honestly, one of the best times to see that is when you're with family, because that's who you're going to appoint to make these decisions for yourself. I mean, mine's my wife, my dad, and my mom. If I came to a family get together and my dad's talking about he's going to start exploring Mars next month, I don't think I want him being in charge of my health care. Or
if he tells you he's going to sell the home and put it all in Bitcoin, you might start to panic.
Yeah, I don't see that happening. If it did, I think we'd have other concerns. We'd be worried about other things, but
Sure. Hey, I have a question, and not to be off topic, but it is about estate planning. And this is from a personal situation regarding my mother-in-law. You, Zach, you do estate planning work there, obviously, right?
Yeah.
So trusts are important, and we've talked about trusts on past shows, Tony, and with Chris, especially when Chris is on. My mother-in-law is in Minnesota and can't pull her away from this advisor she's working with. He's with one of the big box companies, and he told her, and he has an attorney that they work with, but she had set up a trust because she had loaned one of her sons $100,000, and when he paid it back, they set up a trust that went in there, right?
Yeah.
Well, now the advisor is saying you should dissolve that trust because that money's covered in the will. It's going to be covered by the will. Dissolve the trust. I've never heard of somebody, every financial advisor I've talked to, or every time I hear Chris talk, he talks about how great trusts are and how important it is to have a trust and how a will is just, that's going to lead to probate. I've never heard of an advisor or an attorney telling somebody to dissolve a trust.
There are weird one-off circumstances that I would recommend it. Some people set them up for the benefit of their young children. Their kids get older, but instead of dissolving the trust, usually what we do is just amend the beneficiaries.
Right.
I don't know what your guys' laws are out there. I'm no expert in that. I'm not going to portray myself as one, but I wouldn't dissolve the trust. I would keep it in the trust. And then
Right.
upon her passing, it goes where she wants.
Right. Right. I mean, in most cases, a trust is better than a will when it comes, because the will is just instructions. I mean, you need a will as well, but if it's just in the will and you don't have a trust, it's going to probate court. And then that same attorney that is dissolving the trust will make more money. He got paid to set it up. Now he's getting paid to dissolve it. And the attorney who's buddies with this advisor and works with him, the attorney's going to get money for probate court, right?
Yeah, so it's going to be kind of the trifecta there. They're going to hit all the
Mhm.
boxes, and
Yeah,
that's a concern. I mean, if she puts beneficiaries on accounts, it can avoid probate, but most people don't go set their bank accounts up right. So then all of a
right,
sudden she passes away. There's a way bigger estate than would have been before going through probate. So
right.
I wouldn't recommend it, but I also am not an expert in state law out there to
Right,
know
right.
what
Every state
nuances.
is different when it
Yeah.
comes to these laws, and people need to understand that too. If they're listening and they're in Ohio and they've lived here and their relatives are in Ohio, their estates in Ohio, you're the guy. I know you and Chris help so many people with this. I just thought I'd quick throw that out there. I was curious
Yeah, it
about that.
smells fishy.
It's I always look at whether the advisor is looking out for his best interests or the clients, and this is like the fourth thing that he's done or recommended to her that is in his best interest and not the clients. And the advisor, it's the attorney that's going to make out on this one, but I have a feeling this attorney, she never worked with this attorney before, but her advisor said you need to work with this attorney, and he's the one that drew up the trust, and the advisor had him do it. So the advisor might be receiving a kickback, or you just have to watch out in those situations, I think, don't you?
Yeah, and that's where you got to find somebody you feel comfortable with who's always going to look out for your best interest.
Yeah.
And Tony and I have talked about this before. Just because you come in here doesn't mean we're going to push the most expensive things at you, because that's
No.
not what's going to be best for you. We're going to build plans financially and legally that are the most effective for you and your wants and goals,
Yeah,
not
and
what
I
makes
know
us
Chris
the most.
feels that way, and I know that's how Chris has run the business, and he wants to do what's best for his clients, and he's always looking for the best way and the most cost-effective way for the clients. And he shakes it when they have to go through expensive probate court. He shakes his head and said they should have set it up different. And I mean, I think that's great. You need to find somebody you can trust, and Tony and Chris and the team there. I think that's what you always do for your clients is look out for their best interest, right, Tony?
Yeah, Chris's thing has always been take care of the clients and you'll be taken care of. So,
Sure,
it's a win-win on both sides.
sure. So I assume back to the year-end checklist, reviewing documents, like you said, beneficiary designations, make sure you've got your wills and trusts, talk to your parents about it if you're younger. And even if you're my age, my parents are in their 80s, not doing so good. So, couple years ago, I sat down and had them redo their wills. I got the powers of attorney set up, those types of things, right?
Yeah, I think that's one of the most important things is the power of attorneys during their life, because at some point they're not going to want to go do all their bill pays. They're not going to be able to make all their decisions, and they
Right.
want to trust who's in that place. And when you do them the first time, it's going to be different. A lot of people set these estate plans up when their kids are little, and they don't redo them until way later in life, or they wait till it's too late. Like you said, your parents are slowly deteriorating.
Yeah.
And if you wait too long, they're not going to be able to redo it because they're not going to have the mental capacity to do it. And that's where a lot
Right.
of people get into that sticky situation of
Yeah.
things aren't done right.
Yeah. So, Tony, what do you have on the financial side for a year-end checklist?
I think the three biggest things are RMDs, capital gains, and taxes. So with RMDs, most people are aware you have to take withdrawals from your IRAs and in some cases your 401k. That's a predetermined amount. The idea behind it, obviously, is you pay taxes. So if you miss your required minimum distribution, there are penalties that apply. Not I don't think we've ever missed an RMD for somebody between us, the client, and grading it. And if we're using an annuity company, the annuity company everybody sees that magic number of 73. And if it's an IRA and they're 73 or older, the first thing we look at is, did they take enough withdrawals in the calendar year to meet the requirements for their minimum distribution?
So RMD, I think you said it there, what it stands for, just to clarify for our listeners and viewers, that's really massive donut.
Yes.
Oh no, I'm sorry. I was thinking of food again. Required minimum distribution, right?
Yeah, it's like in the movie Anchorman, where they were talking about diversity, and Will Ferrell's character goes, "It's an old English wooden warship," and the guy at the station goes, "Yeah, I don't think the higher ups are concerned with an old English wooden warship."
That's a classic.
My mind goes to ridiculous places sometimes, but yes,
Yeah.
required minimum distribution. Most people are aware of it, and the idea again behind it is the IRS does not want you just deferring taxes on something forever, so they make you take those withdrawals from any IRA, not a Roth, but any IRA, and then they can be done at any point throughout the year, and any withdrawal that you take throughout the year will count towards that required minimum. But at the end of the year, and even 6 weeks out, like now, great time to look at it, because you don't want to get caught without taking it.
Yeah, even before you're that age, at the end of the year, you might want to look at your tax situation and say, hey, let's take out some more, if you're 65 and retired, or 66.
Yeah.
And you have a lot of money in those tax deferred accounts like traditional 401ks and IRAs, you might want to look at taking money out before they make you, if you haven't been regularly withdrawing, to spread the tax burden out. Is that something?
Absolutely. And that brings me to capital gains, because I think it's the same concept. So with tax rates being low for about another year now, depending on if anything gets extended, but with tax rates being where they are now, capital gains, if you've had the funds for over a year, it's a lot lower than income. So you can start taking some capital gains now, realizing those capital gains, rather than just deferring it and not realizing it until the very end, when you either have more built up or capital gains rates skyrocket too. So, capital gains, meaning gains that you have in investment accounts that are not IRAs, not Roths, not workplace accounts, say your individual brokerage account or your transfer on death account. Take those funds and, again, work with a tax advisor, work with your financial professional, and just see if that's in your best interest.
Sure.
To get some of that out of the way.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds good. I think that's great. So capital gains, look at your situation there. Obviously, your overall tax situation.
Yep.
And that's what makes Brookside unique, is that you not only have financial advisors, but CPAs and attorneys like Zach to look at the big picture, especially how your taxes might be affected. And I know a lot of people say, well, I've got a tax preparer that does my taxes each year, but they're just looking back. They might not be looking forward or at your big picture, right?
Yeah, and if you're not actively involving them, they may not even be, Zach and I were talking about this yesterday, about how many tax returns we do. If a client comes to us and they have their financial assets elsewhere, they bring their taxes to us, we're going to do their return. We're going to do what's best for them, but we don't necessarily know what is in those other accounts unless they tell us. So if we don't have it here, we don't have the luxury of just being able to look at it. And that brings me, the last thing I'll say about end of the year stuff, which is pretty common and unique for us, is just overall taxes. I mentioned this probably a month or two ago. It's a good time, and now might really be the end of when you can make any changes, to just check on your tax situation. If you owed $5,000 to the IRS last year and you didn't like that, what changes did you make? You should have made changes earlier in the year than mid-November, but what changes have you made? Have you had extra tax deferral or taxes withheld from your paycheck? Did you maybe put in more to your workplace account to defer taxes on that, to drag your income down for tax purposes a little bit? We run simulations like that. We talk to people about things like that when we do financial planning and when we do taxes. So that's one thing that we've been doing as well, is just running a simulation for somebody. They'll bring their stuff in maybe June, July, August, and we can say, okay, based on what you have this year, if we prorate it out, this is roughly what your tax situation is going to look like for 2024.
Sure. Well, and I think that's really important to look at those things. You said taxes, obviously, when it comes to capital gains, required minimum distributions, really a lot of the year-end stuff, with maybe the exception of beneficiary designations and looking at, that legal checklist, a lot of it has to do with taxes. It's tax related to try to get it done by the end of the year, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And you don't want to pay those penalties with the required minimums. I might also add checking on your asset allocation. This is something that we talk about all the time. It doesn't have to be done at the end of the year. There's no deadline for it, but just making sure that you're still allocated properly across all your accounts. We talk about this all the time too, Tony. If you set up your accounts 20 years ago, 15 years ago when you were working, maybe you were in your mid 50s back then, or your early 50s, and you kind of weren't worried about it. Great time to check in just to make sure, like we said, if there's a market drop coming, you don't want to be overexposed.
Sure, especially if you're entering retirement anytime soon or in retirement, you want to make sure not all your money is at risk, right?
Absolutely.
Now, what would you recommend, Tony, for somebody who doesn't know what they're doing at all with this? Like, what would you recommend they do?
Just bring your statements in. A lot of people we help have accounts everywhere. And I just tell them, bring in your statements. We'll help you make heads or tails. We'll put an easy to read, easy to implement plan in place. We'll make sure that obviously you have exposure to different assets. Depending on where you are, you may or may not need to be concerned with risk. If you don't know what you're doing, that's why we're here.
That's for anybody, right? It doesn't matter what age.
Yeah. Never too late, never too early.
That's awesome. I panicked for just a second there when you said, now, Tony, I thought, oh my gosh, he's asking me a question about this. And then
we'll hit you with the financial questions next week.
You can never have too many Tonys, but I'm glad that
for
a second I forgot that there was another Tony, and I'm like, oh, whew.
Yeah, the name of our
bullet
podcast
on that one
needs to just be Too Many Tonys.
Too many Tonys. You can never have too many Tonys. Well, great show today, guys. Zach, always great to see you on the show. Tony, you should bring him along more often.
Maybe, we'll see.
Well, I know his time is valuable. So, yeah.
Yeah,
I make the cut when there's nothing else going on. They say, okay, you can come on again.
There you go. Yeah.
No, it's really, I'm glad Zach's on, in all honesty. I think this is a good intersection. We use the puzzle piece analogy. It's really good to have your financial, legal, tax all in one place, and at least to inject some of this a little bit different perspective into the conversation, I think is really refreshing and helpful.
Yeah. Well, I know you guys really care about your clients there, and our listeners, you love to hear from them. Speaking of that, before we go, Tony, let our listeners out there know how they can get a hold of you. If they have estate planning questions, they can call and talk to Zach. And if they have other financial planning questions or retirement income planning questions, they can talk to you yourself, right?
Yeah. So at Brookside, we're all in the same building, but at Brookside Financial, brooksidetax.com is our website. Our Facebook page is Brookside Financial. Our YouTube channel, Brookside Financial, and then our phone number 440-886-3550. If you call us, you can still get to Anselmo and Company, but Anselmo has some different contact information too, right, Zach?
Yeah. So for Anselmo, it is anselmolaw.com, and our phone number is 216-485-1040.
All right. Well, guys, great show today. And we're going to wrap it up. That does it for today's episode with Tony Marlette Jr. And we've got Zach here today. I love it.
All right. Thanks, gentlemen. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you.